Hello, everyone. My name is Matt Arant. I'm the founder of Arant Academic Planning, and I'm an independent educational consultant who specializes in both Division III Ivy and Patriot League athletic recruitment, as well as boarding school admission. And this is another installment of our boarding school webinar series in which we talk about those key issues impacting the boarding school admission search from exploration all the way up into admission. And this session tonight is about how do you integrate both day students and boarding students within the larger campus community? And I'm joined by four admission officers from four different schools, both geographically, size-wise, as well as where they're located in terms of urban versus rural or suburban areas. So before we kind of dive into that topic, let's have a quick introduction to our guests. So Nicole, do you want to kick things off for us?
Sure. Thanks, Matt. My name's Nicole Biggie. I'm the director of admission at St. Johnsbury Academy. We're a boarding and day school located in northeastern Vermont, so close to the New Hampshire border and about 45 minutes from Canada. Our campus is located right in a small town, so our students have access to the town. We're very community based, and we're a comprehensive school and serving lots of different students. And I think we'll get into all that in a little bit.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jenny Bean. I'm the Dean of Enrollment Management at Westtown School. Westtown is a pre-K through 12 Quaker coeducational boarding and day school about 45 minutes west of Philadelphia. And I think I'll leave it at that, and we'll come back and talk a little bit more later.
Hi, everyone. I am Melody. I'm the Vice Principal of Enrollment Management at Upper Canada College. We're right in the middle of Toronto, Canada. So we're in a big city here. We are a K to 12 school with 1,300 students, and we are an all-boys school.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tiana Lal-Emard. I'm the Director of Enrollment Management at the Westover School. And Westover is a girls-centered boarding and day school serving grades 9 through 12, and we're located in Middlebury, Connecticut, which is about an hour and a half north from New York City. We enroll about 200 students in total every year. Approximately 30% identify as day students, and the remaining 70% are coming from 24 different countries and 13 states.
Okay, great. Thank you for those introductions. So we kind of touched upon it when you were talking about your individual schools, the day versus boarding school or boarding student breakdown, right? So folks think, oh, boarding schools is going to be 100% or very few. It might just be international students, depending on like me in Texas, for example. We have a couple of boarding schools, but the boarding population is by and large international students, whereas the further north and east you go, that difference is pretty apparent in terms of the split between day and boarding. So before we kind of talk about the process itself, can you briefly share with us, I think Tiana, you did that already, the boarding versus day student breakdown, like an approximation.
Sure, I can start again. Our whole school population, and we're grades 9 through 12 with a few postgraduates, is about 900 students. We have about 200 boarders that are split about a third domestic American and about two-thirds international. And then we have about 700 day students that come from our local area and up to about a 1 hour radius all around us. And I think we'll get into more later on about why Vermont is unique in this situation.
Mhm.
At Westtown, we have about 70% boarders in the upper school, and the other 30% are day students. We have a unique structure where we are pre-K through 12. And so in our 8th grade comes up to our 9th grade, and then we begin our boarding program. And students who start in upper school are required to board in their 11th and 12th grade year. So the class is about 50-50 day boarding in 9th grade. We bring in a big group of boarders in 10th, and then in 11th and 12th, it's about 90% boarding.
Wow. That's really cool. We're maybe the smallest of boarding ratio wise. We're K to 12, 1,300, but then our upper school is about 860 students in total. 88 of them are boarders. So we have a very boutique kind of boarding program. Within the 88 students, about half of them are domestic Canadians, representing 7 provinces actually, and then the rest of them are international. So we currently have about 25 countries represented, and they speak 24 different languages. So it's very exciting, diverse community we have here.
Okay.
You know what? I didn't give those composition stats. For Westtown, we have about 700 students overall and 360 in the upper school. And of our boarders, they represent, I think, 22 different states and 21 different countries. And then overall, it's about 20% international. And of the domestic students, half are BIPOC. A pretty diverse community.
Cool.
And our state and country breakdown is just about the same as well.
For Westover, we're close to 40% international, and then 65% of our students identify as students of color. So
Yeah, a lot of interesting kind of threads we can pull on there. But Jenny, it's interesting you mentioned that about Westtown. So prior to opening up my own shop, I was an admissions representative for Franklin and Marshall College, not too far from me in Lancaster. And funny enough, my first 2 years I had Chester County, so which meant I visited Westtown, and I did not know how heavily border it was at that, especially the 11th and 12th, because you think, oh, Metro Philly, there's such a large population right there, whether it's Chester County, Delco, even going up. I didn't realize it was still that heavily border. So that I learned something right off the bat, even from my time working in the college side. So that was interesting. You brought
We
that.
probably have a higher percentage of local boarders than many
Yeah.
boarding schools because kids, even when they're not required to board, they can choose to board. And every year we'll have, I don't know, 10 or 12 more day students decide to board. And so that local boarding component, I think, is really healthy for our community. Like international students benefit because we have a really thriving host family program. Lots of our lower and middle school families are involved in that. And then anyone who's from farther away, there's a really good chance they're going to have a friend, a roommate, classmate who lives nearby. And so that family support is really available for all of our faraway boarders. And then for the local boarders, they get the benefits of a boarding school experience while still being close to home and being able to go home for dinner with their family when they need to.
And we'll probably go in a little bit more detail about that local border because it almost sounds like an oxymoron when you think about it. Oh, I'm a local student, but I'm boarding. It's a connotation you're boarding that you're thousands of miles away from home. But it's when you have think about 5-day borders versus 7-day, it's another kind of conversation we might talk to or discuss a little bit later. But how I want to kind of structure this is as close to chronologically as possible. So thinking about before the applications are read, decisions are made, all that fun stuff. Thinking about how the admission offices are, I guess, are split in terms of territory. Like when speaking from the college side, it was broken down by state or borough or city in which the school is located in. It was pretty easy to kind of make that adjustment, right? Because we were having students from all over the world apply. But for boarding schools, it may be a little bit different just because of the size of the offices relative to size of college offices. So, long story short, how is that in your respective offices allocated, right? Is there a point person just for boarders, or is it more about, how is that broken down in terms of, I guess, territory when you're thinking about the admission process within your respective schools?
Mhm. I'm happy to go for
Yeah.
it because I have the smallest boarding kind of size. Because of the smaller size, we do a team-based approach. So I myself, we have the director of admissions for boarding, upper school and boarding, an assistant director, and there are the 3 of us that actually travels and recruits for students together. So we all kind of each take a market that makes sense for us for that year. So a student could be reaching out to anybody on the admissions team, and they'll be able to answer questions about boarding for us.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, and we have one admissions counselor who does primarily day students, and then there's 3 others of us that do boarding, but we certainly cross over depending on if someone's traveling or someone might be out of the office. Everybody can work with any family.
Mhm.
I can jump in. So we have a team of 6 folks that travel. So it's almost a similar size to the college admissions world, which is where I came from. And we've transitioned to a model this year where we have one designated person who is corresponding with our day students and families, just so that they have that consistency of hearing from that one person. But my entire team is trained on talking about, what the day student experience is like, what boarding school's like. But that's something that we're sort of trying out this year as we think about the needs of our day students, and their families and what it is that's driving them to choose Westover.
At Westtown, we have a team of 4 that are focused on the upper school enrollment on our team, and I lead the overall team. So I guess I would be a 5th because I also travel with the other counselors there. We have, the whole globe mapped out into territories. And so everyone has territories of boarding recruitment, whether it's relationships and partners or geographic territories. And then for our day students, we have 2 of the counselors on the team who specifically work with day students. And we have a few schools in the area that end in 8th grade that we reliably, have close partnerships with and expect applicants each year. And then we have a lot of other applicants who come from all over the Philadelphia area. But at Westtown, anyone who's applying to upper school is a boarder. So even if they're applying as a day student in 9th grade, they're going to board in 11th and 12th at a minimum. So we're talking about boarding with all of our upper school applicants.
Regardless of the year in which they would be presumably boarding, right?
Right. Mhm.
And so you brought up kind of the idea of traveling within the local community, right? So me coming to the college side, it's pretty straightforward, right? There's a lot of high schools. You go visit them, you do college fairs, you do all that fun stuff, and it's a pretty kind of cut and dry, okay, here's where it ends, and then the next year they might be applying for colleges. Whereas in the boarding side, it's not as clear. There might, in terms of like the schools ending in 7th or 8th or ninth or 10th and for PG years. So when it comes to, I guess, the recruitment part on, I guess, especially in the day school where there's not going to be that long-term, long timeline traveling component. How do you approach that? I think Jenny mentioned there are specific schools, but I guess for the rest of you, how do you reach that local student as opposed to them reaching out to you first? Like what is the tactics or the strategies y'all use to reach out to those non boarding local students?
So I can get started. Because of the situation in Vermont, we actually go and visit a lot of schools that are K-8 because of the school choice in Vermont. And so we have relationships with their principals and guidance counselors, and our day student admission person is well connected to them. We also do an open house. We just had it last week that draws a huge number of day student families, mostly rising 9th graders. But then we also have some day students that maybe don't start with us in grade 9, but they decide they want to come and do a shadow day and check it out and see what we're all about.
And UCC, we're almost 200 years old now, so we have that long history in the city, and being in the middle of the city, that's kind of helpful too, because you're just, a subway ride away if you're not driving, or some students could bike to school. So there is that kind of community awareness about the school. We do a lot of advertising as well, through bus stop shelters. There's a lot of social media campaign that we're trying to reach out to local students. Similar to Nicole, we also have feeder school relationships where a lot of schools that we work with and that we know that they're doing good work, we would reach out to them. We have this in Canada. We do have this kind of local fair where there's all the schools that would go to a centralized location where all the students can come and learn about different grades levels. Open house as well, big undertaking every year, and students are welcome to come even if they're still in a stroller or if they're still in their mom's belly, and a lot of families do come and inquire about the school already. So I think that is one big way that we are reaching out to our local community.
Melody, you mentioned a fair where all the local schools come, and I think that's a lot of our focus at Westtown is collaborating with local consortiums. So we have a group of local day schools, and there are lots of them in the suburban Philadelphia area, and we collaborate on communication and just common timelines and trying to serve our local families well. And then we also partner with our local Quaker schools, and also lots of those in Philadelphia. And so we do some collaborative marketing and outreach and events to raise awareness about the benefits of Quaker schools as well, and try to be accessible to local families. We also do
How about for you being relatively close to not only Philadelphia, obviously, but also South Jersey and even Delaware, right? Me being from Texas, I'm not used to having so many cities close to each other. You have to drive 3 hours to get from place to place, whereas for you specifically, it's not that far. So does that outreach for those local potential borders, does that even stretch up out of state?
Absolutely. Yes. And in fact, one of the counselors on our team just finished yesterday her last visit to a K-8 Quaker school. And there are several of those throughout New Jersey and Pennsylvania. And so we try to nurture what kind of special relationships with the Quaker feeder schools and have kids coming. I mean, I would say the majority of our domestic boarders are from Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware.
Mhm.
And so some of them think they're starting out as day students, and then it's not uncommon for them to, like, a week into the school year be like, can I board? Because
That commute
the
gets
commute,
old fast, right?
yeah. And like many boarding schools, it's such a vibrant community full of life in the evenings and on the weekends. The kids want to be a part of it and don't want to be having their parents don't want to be picking them up in their PJs at 9:30 at night.
Yeah.
At Westover, very similar to many of the schools here, we are in a very saturated market. So there are a lot of K-8, K-9 junior boarding schools. So 10th grade for Westover is actually a pretty significant intake year for us as a result of that. So every year we are still traveling to those schools. We're nurturing those relationships. We will do counselor calls with those schools, when it comes time to do application review. And so we're very careful, about how we continue to foster that relationship with our partners. We also do things like receptions within parts of Connecticut that are hotspots for us. So New Haven, for example, we get a lot of students from the New Haven County, and so we'll host receptions in the fall in an effort to get families to come in and see us, and it's a very casual setting. And then the last thing I would say too is that we have a very strong squash program at Westover, a very strong dance. And so this year we created two half-day long sessions where we invited middle school students from the local area to come to campus, and they get to learn from the experts, being our Westover students who play squash or our students who do dance. And so that's been a really great way of us, again, engaging with the local community. It's at very low cost. It's $25 for a student to register. We provide them lunch. We invite their families to campus, and it just gives them an opportunity to see Westover in a different light.
Hmm.
Cute. And Melody, now kind of going to your specific situation, being in a bona fide urban area, right? Toronto is a huge, huge area, and your school is smack dab in the middle of it. So, what is it like to work at a boarding school in which the city literally surrounds you? When you think of boarding school, you think of the pastoral, bucolic nature. It has its pros and cons for depending on who you're talking to, but for you being in that metropolitan area, how does that inform your admissions process to especially the local students that are from local, I guess, in the sense that they're domestic, they're other provinces of Canada, or even still staying within Toronto. How do you approach that in the admissions process for your school?
Yeah, definitely. The perk of being older than the country itself is that the city really developed around the school. So we're
Mhm.
very lucky to have 35 acres of land as a campus in the middle of Toronto, which is amazing. And one great thing is really, we always say that Toronto is part of the campus, right? Because whatever Toronto has to offer, that's what boarding students get to experience too. So if you want to go watch the Jays lose, sadly, that is, you can easily take the subway and be able to go do that. And experience kind of the crowd when we first got into the World Series, or if you
Well,
want
they just lost the last game though. They did very well all up until
to.
game seven. But
Yeah.
to date our webinar, well, by mentioning that. So
Yeah. And then, say if students want to watch the Raptors, for example, like it's there. We have museums. One of the examples that I love from last year, actually, a student who wants to go into medicine, actually found a volunteering opportunity at a hospital in Toronto, and he would be able to just hop on a subway, 15 minutes later, be there and volunteer there every Saturday. And that's something that is very privileged of us to be able to have access to all these opportunities. Um, Great thing about being one of the most diverse cities as well in the world is that even within our day population, it's extremely diverse, that we have students living nearby. And so with that, it's just a very different and unique experience, I would say, as a boarding student here. And for families that are coming from farther away, the airport is 20 minutes away from the school. So you get here and then you get on campus. And we do have a lot of students that are coming from different provinces as well within Canada, like from British Columbia on the West Coast or Newfoundland from the East Coast. And similar to Tiana, a lot of them are attracted by, for example, we have 2 ice hockey rinks on campus. So a lot of the aspiring Maple Leafs NHL players do want to come and be part of our hockey team. And we have a lot of drafting action happening in the city too, being in Toronto. So there are a lot of definitely big city perks that we enjoy here.
okay, great, thank you. So kind of thinking a bit more, I guess, 30,000 foot, 50,000, way up there in terms of thinking about kind of top down choices about the enrollment populations, right? We think about higher education and education control is all about trends, right? Like in response to what's happening, increasing boarding, increasing day. So I was wondering, in each of your cases, what has been, I guess, the primary trends you've noticed, maybe, I guess, post-COVID, because it's been long enough that that seismic shift has hopefully abated for the most part. Now, what have you seen in your respective schools about, I guess, senior officials about increasing, decreasing either the day or boarding school, if any, if it hasn't made an impact, that's news in and of itself too. So if you kind of share with us briefly what you've seen in the last 3 or 4 years in terms of the overall populations of both or either your boarding or day students.
I can start. I think I talked a little bit already about Westtown's unique structure and how that sort of dictates what our composition is. A little bit of history, though, is at about 10 years ago, Westtown changed our boarding requirement. And before that, all students were required to board in 11th and 12th grade, even if they'd been here since kindergarten. And so we changed the boarding requirement to say only upper school students need to do that. If you start in 8th grade or later, is boarding required. And so that the ratio of boarding today and the number of kids boarding didn't change very much right
Mhm.
away when that policy changed, because the culture here was still very much around like it's what you do is you board your junior and senior year. And then COVID disrupted a lot of norms, and students who were local were encouraged to be day students during COVID so that there was less density in the dorms. And so coming out of COVID, it's more of a norm. It's more okay to be a day student. And so we're seeing now that there are, 10 day students in the senior class, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a little bit higher than what was the norm before COVID. And our upcoming classes are larger overall, and they have more day students in them. So I would say our ratio has been around 70% total. It's probably going to, in the coming years, over the next 2 years, be more like 2/3, because we'll have a
Okay.
few more. Our boarding population is stable, and it's more day students that are coming up from our middle school and deciding to remain day students, at least for their junior year. And then we're still seeing a lot of kids wanting to board for their senior year.
Mhm.
Our populations are Our day student population is pretty steady. It's grown a little bit in the last couple of years. And then our boarding population also has been pretty steady. We've seen some similar trends that a lot of boarding schools have seen, with international populations going down for really reasons outside of our control. But we're able to be pretty fluid with both populations. We have space on campus for more boarders, and because of our size, we have a lot of flexibility to be able to take more students if they come.
I would say at Westover post-COVID, we're seeing a lot of the local boarders. That is a trend we're seeing, where we have students who live, 2, 3 minutes away from campus, but they're opting to partake in the boarding experience. And I think students are eager for those opportunities to be independent, and to experience what it's like to live away from home before they go off to college. And so as a school, we're sort of navigating that space as we are trying to grow our enrollment. Westover's been around since 1909. And so the building and its capacity on its own is limited. And so this year, as I mentioned, with part of our strategy of assigning one specific person from the team to work with day students, we're going to be doing a bit of counseling for those local boarding students who do live down the street, at least, when they start their early years, to encourage them to consider the day student experience. Westover, I think one of my favorite aspects of working at Westover is that we are very intentional about the community life and cultural experience of our day students. So we say that we have 200 students total. All 200 of them are considered residents at Westover. The only difference between our day and our boarding students is that our day students don't have a designated bed. And there are particular times of the year and even throughout the week where our day students are encouraged to stay in residence and stay in the dorms, and many of them take advantage of that. And so we're sort of breaking the mold of what it means to be a day student. And again, we're in a market where you do have that line of segregation between the boarding experience and the day, and we're trying to really be intentional about disrupting that in the market.
For us, for boarding, we are limited by the number of beds, and that's 88, and we're maxed out. So we're happy that we're full, and it's going on strong. And there has been a lot of worries, I think within the industry too, about, with the uncertainties that's all over the world, and with the economic situation, is that going to make people less, willing or more hesitant and want to wait and see. So this is interesting, and we'll see how it turns out to be. But I think post-COVID, I think a lot of local families do see the benefit of independent school and how we have the flexibility to kind of switch and adapt, and the resources that we can put into just changing very quickly. And I think that has really contributed to, domestic boarders and even day students wanting to come because they really see the value of it post-COVID. And I think that's a big change that I'm seeing.
So, Nicole, thinking about, you alluded to this earlier about kind of the unique situation you're in and as a school in Vermont. So, would you kind of share with us briefly like, what that entails and how it impacts, I guess, your day-to-day work as well as the overall, I guess, health or function of SJA itself?
Yeah, absolutely. So the state of Vermont has a very long history of school choice. So because of the rural nature of our state, there are many towns and areas that don't have public high schools. And so rather than building a cooperative school or forcing students to go to a public high school in the next town over, for decades, the towns have given tuition vouchers to students. It's primarily high school students. There are a couple of very rural areas that have school choice for K to 12, but the vast majority have at least an elementary and middle school, and then they provide vouchers for high school. So where we're located, we're in a pocket of about 10 or 12 school choice towns. And then there's some a little bit further from us. And so The students receive a voucher from their town and they have true choice. No, they are not forced to go to any school. They can choose a public school of their choosing within a distance, however far they want to go. There are a couple other private schools near us. They can switch if they start at one school and decide it's not for them. They can apply to another one. So we really see part of our mission as serving the local community. Um, and it really puts us as such a great part of the community because we're really partners. We educate most of the region's teenagers, and so they're really invested in us as we are in the local community. And it also means that we have all kinds of students, which we think is one of the coolest part about our schools. We actually give the opportunity of a private education to a lot of kids that maybe wouldn't have that opportunity otherwise. And it gives our boarding students and our day students some opportunities to meet each other and get to know about cultures of the world or get to know about kids who live in Vermont. And because we've been doing this for so long, they truly do integrate. It's just part of the way our school culture is that boarding students go home with day students and day students hang out on campus all the time. And it's really a fantastic model.
Yeah, because it's both or all three. It's rural, sparsely populated, but it's still relatively small, right? So you have the ability, because I was thinking about my being here in Texas. A lot of Texas is rural, but they're far away from each other. So every small town has a school because they can't afford to literally drive 30 to 45 minutes just to go to one place, right? So that's kind of a unique positioning Vermont has as being rural, small, relatively speaking, geographically, as well as sparsely populated too. So it's kind of a unique spin on that.
Yeah, so I would say the vast majority of our day students are probably within like 20 to 30 minutes of campus, but we certainly have some other families that have tuition vouchers that choose to drive, 45 minutes or an hour.
Hmm. Okay. So
And
now
we
kind of
also have
shift.
students
Oh,
who, sorry, we also have students that live in school choice towns that choose to board, like everyone's been talking about local borders. So we
mhm.
get that as well from Vermont and New Hampshire.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So I get shifting gears now, kind of going forward in time to when all the kids are on campus, right? Either as a boarder or a day student. We kind of alluded to earlier about kind of historic tension, how deserved that term is, between the local students and the boarders, right? You kind of think about it's almost like a K through 12 version of like the town gown, in which there's the town component and the university component, and oftentimes they might be at each other's throats, but however accurate that depiction is. But now thinking about it that way, when you have schools that have both a rich boarding population as well as local, can you kind of speak to some of the specific ways in which you're able to draw those two populations together to make it seem like everyone is a legitimate part of that community from day one all the way to graduation? I think, Tiana, you mentioned some specific things about they can literally stay in the dorms for sometimes. I'm assuming maybe around finals in which they're at the library late in the school year, but are there no specific, I guess, programs or initiatives that your offices are taking to ensure that gap between local students and boarding students aren't as wide as they might have used to be?
Yeah, I can jump in here. So at Westover, we have an initiative called the Daymates program, and it was designed to do exactly what you're talking about. It's to strengthen those connections between the boarding and the day students. And so what it is that our day students can officially pair up with a boarding student, and then through that Daymates program, day students are more fully integrated into the boarding experience, so they can go up on corridor and spend time in the dorm. Whoever they designate as their partner, that day student can leave their things in that room, and then they can also stay overnight. And so it's not just limited to like a finals period or any
Hmm.
major component of the school year, but if a student wanted to on a Friday night just stay on campus because they want to go to the beekeeping class on Saturday, then they can do that. And there's very minimal that they have to do to complete that process because they've already designated that person. And I will say just in a general sense too, I've been working at Westover since 2021, and I would say that even then, even during a time where we were really navigating post-COVID and getting our students reintegrated back in, that the school has just done a really good job of being intentional in enforcing that our day students, this is your home too. And because of that, they fully embrace that culture. They stay late for events. They join our weekend social activities. They'll come back to campus. They get involved in leadership activities. They do our Saturday classes. And so it really just it fosters that sense of belonging across the board for our students.
So it's almost like a reversal of like the 5-day border, right? In which you're on campus Monday through Friday, and then you tail you tail out Friday afternoon, and you come back Monday. It's I'm a reversal of that in which you are local, but then you come on the weekends or for certain kind of specific instances for that.
Yeah, I mean, we had a student last year who she was a ninth grader and she came in as a day student and her commute was about an hour. And
Mhm.
she was a really dynamic student. And so she got comfortable very quickly. She made a lot of friends. She got involved in a couple of different clubs and organizations. And so she was leaving school at 10 o'clock every night. Her mom had to come and pick her up
Yeah.
at 10 o'clock every night and do that drive an hour back. And so her mom by this spring semester said, Tiana, she's going to be a boarder. Like we're done doing this drive, right? And that's really, fulfilling to hear that a student, wants to be on campus that late, just, regardless of how far that they're coming. And that, she eventually got comfortable enough and her mom got comfortable enough for her to live on campus. And she's thriving this year, as a result of it.
And for us, because all of our boarding students will be meeting day students in classes and in co-curriculars, and because we have so many opportunities there, they're easily integrated within the student body. And that's also the perk of being in the city too. Like your day classmates all live 5-10 minutes walking distance away from the campus. So on the weekends, it's very common for boarding students to go to apply for a sleepover at a day student's home, and vice versa too. We also have day students coming in and asking if they could do a sleepover in the boarding house. There's a lot of day students coming in and play board games in the common room area after school until they have to go home for dinner. And a lot of times they bring the boarding student with them and go for dinner, and they come back before curfew. So for us, it's very well integrated because
Mhm.
of the location and also because of kind of the ratio of our students.
Um, Listening to you talk about these experiences, I think when I describe what's happening at Westtown, I want to talk as a parent. I have two kids at Westtown. One is a senior who boards, and one is a ninth grader who's a day student. And my husband and we live on campus, so we're not like a true reflection of a boarder or a day student because we're so close. But we were just saying last night that we see our kids about the same amount of time, and one lives on campus and one lives in our house. And our senior, came home Sunday because he wanted to pick up a pair of basketball shoes. And he's like, "What's for dinner? Are you guys having a better dinner at home than is in the dining room? Because maybe I'll come home for dinner too." And then he went right back for his Sunday night. We have residential life curriculum programming on Sunday nights. My ninth grader is like many ninth graders, he's in upper school and he's really like embracing the freedom and independence of an upper schooler. And so he'll be like, "I'm heading up to the gym and then I'm going to go hang out in, the ninth grade boys dorm. And then we'll probably go to, I'll be back at like 10:30." And we just won't see him for the whole day on the weekend because he's on campus. He studies on campus, comes up for study hall so he can go to see his math teacher and study in the library. So just as a day student, taking advantage of a lot of those opportunities for boarders, which really is the culture here. That the day kids are staying. And then when Simon got home last night, he was telling us about his day. He said he had a really great day because his Spanish presentation went well and something else happened. And then he said, and he asked a girl on a date who is a boarder. And then he said, Mom, how do boarders go on dates? And so he's been exploring that today and recognizing that, she can put in a leave request to come to our house and then we can drive her somewhere, or he can sign up for the same weekend trip that she does and they can go together. So I thought that was a nice little way to illuminate a real life experience of how day students and boarders are connected. And then institutionally, we have one of our deans is the day student coordinator. And so her role is to communicate with day families and support their needs and make sure things like, what time does the event end? What time should we pick up is included in the communication that sometimes, a boarding school might forget the logistical needs of day parents. And we also encourage the overnights. Kids can come for sleepovers in the dorms, or boarders can sign out to day student homes whenever they like on the weekends. And then day students can spend 10 school nights on dorm as well. And if they are invited by a friend, that's great, but they don't have to be. They can just request with the upper school that they'd like to have an overnight on dorm, and we'll set that up for them.
And I'll just share one quick story that these friendships last. I was just in Tokyo last week, and a current parent was showing me a picture of one of our local day students who had gone to Japan last summer and spent several weeks with them in their home. So this isn't just, while students are on campus, and I'm sure everyone else can attest to this, that these are lifelong friendships.
Yeah, absolutely.
And y'all schools are all relatively small especially in comparison to colleges, right? So that tight-knittedness, that hopefully that's a word, is even magnified even more because you're in a educational setting, but it's still very much smaller than if you were going to a big college or even a smaller college. It's just a difference in the size of the community itself.
Mhm.
So as we kind of wrap things up here, I was hoping for the four of you to offer a piece of advice, whether it's about, or maybe it's whether it's geared towards a family that's kind of on the fence about boarding versus day, if they're privileged enough to be in close proximity to boarding schools, for example, or they're international students on this call. Like what is it like to be an international boarder in a different country that's thousands of miles away? Just what sort of advice would you impart on those students and families that are trying to think, is this a worthwhile choice to make, right? Boarding or being a day student at a boarding school. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
I have one piece of advice. I think that there's lots of advice, but let me pick one thing that when prospective families are kind of assessing the quality of a boarding school, and one of the common questions we get is, what is your percentage of boarders versus day students? And there's a perception that if that percentage is too low, then that automatically means it's not as high quality a boarding program, which I understand that you might think, oh, well, there aren't going to be as many resources devoted to it if there are all these day students taking resources away, or vice versa. But I think that doesn't really tell the whole story to just ask for percentages. I think I would encourage prospective families to take a deeper dive to really understand how programs are structured, both for boarders and for day students. What are the resources that are allocated to the programs? And what is the culture on campus, and how those two populations interact? Because you can have all different ratios of day and boarding students, and that you can't assume that any of those things are healthy. So I just think it's a nuanced topic, because some schools, the boarding versus day community is not healthy, and there is one population that receives, maybe is the primary focus and the other isn't, but it's not necessarily based on the percentage.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I think one thing that I love telling families is, it really changes your experience, because you're not only here to, and I always want to say that boarding is more than a bed. You're not only here to sleep and then you go to school the next day. Like Nicole says, the friendship is forever. And you really learn a lot about, who you are as a person when you're interacting with people from different cultures with different perspectives. And you need to learn conflict resolution. Like when you are in a fight with a roommate, how do you actually resolve that? And your relationship with adults is very different. Typically, a math teacher might leave after 3:30, but then you're having dinner with them. They're on duty at night, and you can just go to them and chat about life and chat about math. And I think that relationship really transforms your education, and especially at those age where you're still figuring out who you are and your position in the larger community. So I would really encourage families to look into boarding as an option, and you have a lot of eyes on your child. The moment he's a little quieter than usual, there's a team meeting behind the door talking about how do we support this child and how do we help him. And so I think these are the things that should put families at ease for sure.
Yeah, I have just a couple of quick things. I know a lot of us who have boarding schools, we're always talking, as we all did today, about the countries they come from and the cultures kids have exposure to. But I think for our boarding students, I think our day students offer the same opportunity. So, you might meet a family that's had fabulous experiences, but they live close to the school and their kids are day students, and you're able to benefit from that. And for the boarders, we talk a lot about what a great stepping stone it is at boarding school before you go to college. You're not in college, you're completely on your own, at least in the US you are. Whereas at boarding school, you're making some of your own decisions. You have a little bit of independence, but you have a whole circle of people that are around to support you just in case you get off track or maybe don't make the best decision. And I think those kids are probably very well adjusted when they do head to university after boarding school.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's said such great advice. So I will keep it simple. And I think for me, when I'm talking to a family that is more cautious about boarding school, my advice is to always say, why not put a couple on the list? I think, my background was in college choice. And when I think about eighth graders going into ninth grade who go through this process, it's very similar to a 12th grader going into college. There is a lot of change that happens just over the course of the admission cycle. So from the time they start as seventh graders for some of our students, until the point that they make a decision in April of their eighth grade year, there is just such a developmental shift that happens that I always tell a family it never hurts to put those options on the list to play it out and see, when it's time to make a choice, their minds may change over the course of that year. And so you always want to leave that option open for them, if they do change their minds.
Great. It's a great thing to end on. So, on behalf of Tiana, Melody, Jenny, and Nicole, thank you again for tuning in, and I hope this was informative.